Hello, and welcome to our Economic Recovery Panel. It's such a pleasure to be with you here this morning, here in St. John's. The Honourable Siobhan Coady, Deputy Premier, Minister of Finance, Minister responsible for the Public Service Commission, and Minister responsible for the Newfoundland and Labrador Liquor Corporation. Good morning. Hello.
Great to be here with you.
And hello to you virtually. Of course, you know, we're all very used to Zoom these days, and we're joined with Ms. Gudie Hutchings, Member of Parliament for the District of Long Range Mountains and Parliamentary Secretary for Rural Economic Development and Women Gender Equality. So good morning to you both.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Lynn. Gudie, great to see you as always.
Great to see you, my friend Siobhan and Lynn. Thanks for doing this. And you're right, this is the new normal. So
It is.
I'm glad to be joining you from the best coast. I can say that from this.
And we're thrilled to have you. And of course, we have all our social distancing measures here in place. We'll get right to it. So we have about an hour for our conversation this morning, specifically focusing on economic recovery. And so the first thing I'd like to talk about is the approach to the recovery plan. So perhaps we'll start with you, Minister Coady. You know, can you talk about, from the provincial perspective, what's the approach? I mean, obviously the plan is in process, but maybe tell us about that process. Where are we going?
Well, certainly, and I'm happy to be here today and happy to be part of MNL's conference and virtual conference that it is. Lynn, let me say this. First of all, the budget is just going through the House of Assembly. We're near finished the votes that are required to get the budget through the House of Assembly. The most important thing I think that the budget does speak to, of course, is the economy. And it speaks to what things that we're investing in, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are investing in. And you'll see things there like investments in small business, investments in tourism, in fisheries, in aquaculture, in technology, in oil and gas, and mining, you know, just to name a few. So there are investments throughout the budget this year, and that will really help to stir the economy and continue the economy as we move through COVID. The most important thing, of course, is that we keep each other safe, and I'm very proud of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who've worked so hard to keep each other safe. I mean, it really speaks to our community and our listening abilities to making sure that, as you said, we have the COVID protocols in place. The second big thing I'll say is we have now struck an economic recovery team, a commission. We have Dame Moya Green, who's bringing together a lot of very qualified, very stellar Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
An incredible list,
Incredible
actually.
list.
Yes.
You know, across all sectors of our communities.
Absolutely.
And are coming together to look at our economy, look at how it can be improved, look at our financial situation, how can it be improved, and they're going to come together and bring forward a number of opportunities. And I think it's a very, very important task that they've taken on, and I appreciate that. And then thirdly, and I'll say this to all the leaders that are listening today, we certainly want their involvement, their best and brightest ideas to come forward on how we can continue to grow our economy and how we can address the structural financial situation in our province. So I'll leave it at those three big things. Lots of investments in the budget, in our economy, in improvements in our economy. The task force or the team that has been put together with Dame Moya Green, and the third, welcoming people's opportunities for bold ideas and how we can improve things in Newfoundland and Labrador.
And so for you, Ms. Hutchings, how is the federal government, of course, they have to deal with the recovery plan for the country as a whole, but as a representative of Newfoundland and Labrador, how is the federal government working with the province to assist with that path forward?
Well, Lynn, thanks for that. But first of all, I too want to say a big shout out to the MNL, this new virtual conference. And I'll be curious to see your participation numbers later. Maybe the numbers will be higher. I've had the pleasure of attending the conference before, and you've had a great turnout. But with this new technology and the new way of doing things, maybe your numbers will be higher. The other thing, I just want to take a minute as my role of PS for Wage, Women and Gender Equality, to give a shout out to our female first minister and our first finance minister. So Siobhan, my friend, proud of you. Congratulations. I know you can do it well. And just another note, for women that are looking into getting into politics at whatever level. You may have noticed last week there were 2 by-elections nationally, and we now have, of the 338 seats in the House of Commons in Ottawa, we have now reached a milestone of 100 women. So we've come a long way, and women contribute so much differently, as you two women know, to the conversation. We multitask differently. We bring a different viewpoint. So I'm excited to having that extra female lens. And again, Dame Morton, your provincial economic recovery panel is going to bring another set of eyes, which is incredible. But I just want to go back to the point at hand of where we are today. Number one, whoever thought 8 months ago, 9 months ago, we'd even be having a virtual conference? COVID took the world by storm. There's no playbook for this. And even though some make comparisons to the Great War, I love to say this, when Churchill stood on the balcony and said, the Germans have receded, our boys are coming home, we knew the war was over. We don't know when COVID is over. So as the Prime Minister said often, and all our ministers and all my colleagues from coast to coast to coast, we will be there for Canadians. And we have been since day one. When COVID hit, we came out with the CERB, then it was followed by the business, the CEBA, the Canadian Emergency Business Loan. We come out with the wage subsidy, the rent relief, and now the rent subsidy. Even locally in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Regional Rural Relief Recovery Fund has put over $20.7 million into our economy. The Seafood Stabilization Fund has put another $5.3 million. Just a few weeks ago, we announced just under $395 million to help offshore oil admissions and employees there. And of the programs, there's been over $1.5 million to help. Of the programs, $1.5 million have been used for municipalities. And then, of course, just this week, Minister Bennett announced where the Safe Restart money was going, the $27.4 million that we've given to municipalities to get their new normal in place and get on. So we will be there for Canadians. We will always work with the province as we had from day one during this, but there's no playbook. So there's no, we'll work together as we have been to make sure that we do get to the new normal, whatever the new normal is going to be, Lynn. I think the world changed after 9/11. I think the world has changed again after COVID. And we all have to get to that new normal, what it is going to be, to get our economy going and to get us back, and always being health and safety first.
Thanks very much. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and of course, this convention has always had, hundreds of people in attendance. But one of the things we've learned with COVID-19 is how accessible some of these virtual events can be. And so, perhaps we're learning things too, about making things more accessible to others. And I wonder, in future years, if there's going to be a hybrid of this sort of thing. I
agree with you. I think this has been a fabulous forum for being able to have good conversations. You're able to see the person that you're speaking with. That interaction is the same. So it has been a great opportunity, and I'm really glad to see MNL doing the conference this way.
Of course. And, there was no way they could miss it. It's such an important part for learning for municipalities and their representatives throughout the province. And so for our municipal representatives who are watching today, can you talk to us about the role of municipalities going forward in our recovery? Economic recovery, COVID recovery, what's the role of municipalities, in terms of this federal, provincial, municipal collaboration?
Well, the first thing I would say, Lynn, is how important leadership is in all of this. And I think Canada, with the Prime Minister, with the Premier, with municipal leaders, we've certainly shown the world of how important it is to show that leadership. And I want to commend members of councils around the province, the mayors around the province, who've really demonstrated that leadership and have kept people safe because of it. We have been very fortunate in Newfoundland and Labrador to have very few cases, but I think it's not by happenstance. It's the fact that we have had municipal leaders, provincial leaders, federal leaders step up, keep each other safe, demonstrating to the communities how important that kind of ensuring we adhere to the rules and requirements around COVID. So that leadership is very important. And I think too, it's also that leadership is demonstrated not just in health, but it's also demonstrated in the economy. And you're seeing. You're seeing the mayors and councillors and other leaders in the community come together to support things like tourism, to support things like economic development, the fisheries, forestry, aquaculture, agriculture, all in the communities, and demonstrating leadership in terms of the growth and opportunity that we have for the economy. And this year, while it's been a very, very difficult year for all sectors of our economy, all sectors of our community, we certainly have had some bright spots. Tourism, even though it's certainly been down, and we can't wait to welcome the world again. We're a very welcoming people, and we want to welcome the world. But even the staycations, I know that I traveled throughout the province this year and made sure I vacationed and staycationed as everywhere that I could in Newfoundland and Labrador. I know our colleagues around the province have done the same. That leadership is very important. I think too that the encouragement, the enticement, the support in industries like mining. We've seen some great growth in mining this year, in gold, in iron ore, and not just in the production. We've also seen it in investments, for example, in discovery. So I think by being proactive, by showing that leadership ability in communities, by being, I'm going to use the word hopeful. We could all, as my mother would say, take to our beds. We could, we really could. This has been a very difficult year. Yeah. But because I see municipal leaders, in their local communities, provincial leaders, federal leaders, out there, moving around saying, we're going to get through this together. I think that demonstrates that we are indeed going to get through this together. And the investments that the federal, provincial, and municipal governments are making in their communities are going to bear fruit into the future. And you're seeing it in mining, you're seeing it in aquaculture, you're seeing it in agriculture, you're seeing it throughout the province. Albeit we're in a very difficult situation globally. It's not a Newfoundland and Labrador phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. And you can see, the oil and gas industry is taking a particularly hard hit, and that's hitting municipalities all across the province. But, we're working on plans, and as Gudie said, the federal government just stepped in with $320 million. The provincial government has stepped forward in supports for the industry. We're working with the industry to try and continue to encourage growth and development. But it's that kind of leadership, if I can say that word again, that I think that'll really work well in our communities and in our province and our country.
And so for you, Gudie, what are you hearing from municipal leaders on the west coast of the province in particular? Of course, tourism, such a huge industry on the west coast of the province. But what are you hearing from municipal leaders, and how are you working with them now on the path forward?
Lynn, I think Siobhan hit the nail on the head. It is working together that is going to make the difference. And I think you're seeing that now. Not that not municipalities and federal and provincial, we always did to somewhat, but I think now everyone has been forced to step back and say, okay, how can we make our dollar go further? What can we do together? How can we work together to make sure that we are accomplishing our end goals and keeping our community safe and making sure we're taking advantage of any opportunities that are out there? But you're so right, Lynn. The tourism industry, there have been a few sectors that have been hit very, very hard, tourism being one of them. And what I did find, and I too, like Siobhan, have traveled about, and encourage everyone, if you haven't been to the West Coast, come over. And what I noticed in my travels, you did chat to people, because Siobhan and I, well, we're politicians and we always talk to people wherever we go. It was interesting that people said, "Oh my golly, I'd never been here before." I was down on the south coast of my riding, and it was, "Oh my golly, I didn't realize there were these beautiful beaches here." So it was a great awareness for Newfoundland and Labradorians to visit and explore our province. But you're right, the tourism sector has been hit hard. So what I say, and I chat with H&L and I chat with the leaders regularly, both provincially and nationally, we need to get that new normal. So what is that new normal going to be? So how do you revamp your programs? How do you revamp your product? To give your staff and your community that you live in the assurances that everyone will be safe. And then B, to give me, the consumer, or you, the consumer, the confidence again to know. So Grossmore National Park, Grossmore National, Friends of Grossmore, sorry, that operate in the park, they came out with a Grossmore Clean and Safe campaign. So they were saying, here's what we're doing in all our businesses, everything from hotels to a bus tour to a boating experience to a picnic to everything. They here's our plan to show that this whole area is safe and clean for you to come in. And here are our new protocols. Here's what we're doing. They availed of some modern technology to make sure that they were killing viruses. So they have launched that. So if that's the new normal, let's everybody get onto it. The other thing you saw in the tourism industry is people started to revamp their product offerings. So instead of an experience that was marketed to 20, 50, 80 people, they were now retailering their product. So it was a smaller, unique, and oftentimes they could charge a little more. So it's focused us all it's made us all step back and refocus on what we can do, because you need the confidence of me or you, the consumer, and the employee, that everyone is going to be safe and that we can work together in this new normal to reboot our tourism industry and get it started. And I'm confident, and I know Siobhan agrees with me, that when we do get to the other side of this, and it sounds like a sci-fi movie, doesn't it, when we get to the other side, but whenever we do, the world is going to want what Newfoundland and Labrador and Atlantic Canada, and frankly, rural Canada from coast to coast to coast has. I think we're all going to be looking for the big outdoor spaces to get the confidence that we can travel again. And I'm looking forward to that. And again, we're only going to get there by all working together.
And in speaking about travel again, of course, the airline industry has been significantly impacted by the pandemic. With the island portion of the province, Labrador, which has its own, difficulties in terms of transportation and access, the impact on the transportation industry, airlines, ferries, how is the provincial government and the federal government working together to ensure that post-pandemic we're going to have the transportation services that we need for the recovery?
It's a very good question, and we all know that use of airlines and travel has been decimated by the pandemic, and it has to be, really, because that movement of people has been challenged by COVID itself. So we all reflect on that, and we all understand it, and we all know that we're all going to have to help with this situation. We all want to have airports in our communities. We all want to have the best roads, and there is a lot of emphasis, I think, in the budget. I think there's some $609 million for infrastructure, and a lot of that, $169 million, I think, for roads. So there's a tremendous investment in that. But what you're actually talking about is how are we going to support the airline industry, the airports coming through this pandemic? I have had a meeting with the Premier with with many of the airports around the province, and we understand the impacts that they're having. So I think there's going to have to be investments. I think that we're going to have to recognize that there's going to have to be supports to be given to airports, and I know the federal government is working towards that, and municipalities are advocating on behalf of their communities, and the provincial government is doing what it can to support airports and support airlines coming through this pandemic. And hopefully that'll be, as soon as we can get I guess it will be a vaccine, hopefully within the next year, and we'll be able to go back to that, that travel. But supporting that industry while we're going through this is going to be critical. And, we're working with the federal government on this. I've raised it at the national level. I know Gudie's raised it many, many times. And I know that the federal government is considering what it can do. We're working with municipalities on their infrastructure requirements. You saw in the budget, for example, monies towards the Trans-Canada the Labrador Highway. You've seen a road to the north. We're going to do a feasibility study or pre-feasibility study on the road to the north. So there are those investments, but specifically, we do know that airlines and airports are going to need some additional supports coming through this pandemic.
And would you like to speak to that, Gudie? It's a national issue.
It is a national issue from coast to coast to coast, Lynn, and we know that when we do reach the road to recovery, that we do need to ensure that we have the small rural carriers and the small regional airports still there to assist. And also remember that the small rural airlines, the connectors, feed into the hub. So we need to make sure that we still have our national carriers viable and safe. But Minister Jolie is working on a plan because, as you know, we haven't really done a lot of sector specific, but we do know in this regard we have to look at that. But the other thing, and I had a chat, one of our caucuses had some presentations from the national airlines just this past week. And the big thing is, and it alludes to what Minister Coady said and what I said earlier, people have to have the confidence that it is safe to fly. And that's the other thing, airlines and ferries and trains and buses, whatever, they need bums in seats. That's how they get their money. That's how they get going. So we need to make sure that the confidence is there for the consumer that it's okay. It's okay to fly. So I've been in St. John's Airport, Deer Lake, Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto airports. Pardon me, I've been on Marine Atlantic, and each and every time I feel very safe and secure. The masks are mandatory. I wear a shield as well as a mask when I travel outside of Atlantic Canada. And with the quarantine regulations, I feel very safe. Airports have never been cleaner. The airlines, all the aircraft are clean. There are systems in place when you land. So people need to know that it is safe. And it's interesting because I said this to the air carriers that I met with last week, that they need to start talking about what they are doing about the new filterization systems that, it's virtually impossible for you to get the virus on the plane. And when it's reported that a case was travel related, they need to fix the verbiage on that because the individual didn't get it on the aircraft. They got on the aircraft or the ferry or the train with it. So we need to make sure that that's very clear. And, we have the app that you put on your phone and, you'll get an alert if you've been it's in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's in Ontario. We need to get other provinces into that, which will give you an alert that says you've been exposed to someone in your vicinity had it. You may have seen that the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Freeland, she's in self-isolation now because the app went off on her phone and said that somebody in her, whatever the meter distance is, had been exposed to COVID, was a COVID carrier. So she is taking the precautions and self-isolating now. So whatever the measure is, we need to get people safe and secure to fly and travel again. We need the new normal across the country. So it's the same experience that Siobhan gets when she gets on a plane in St. John's, or if I get on in Halifax or wherever. We need to know that new normal is there. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with us washing our hands more. There's nothing wrong with wearing a face mask. We've all traveled. Siobhan, you travel just as much as I do. How many times have you been on a plane and somebody across from you, a year ago was coughing and sneezing and you'd say, oh my God, they've got a terrible cold, and you'd lean over away from them as far. Maybe the new normal is you have to wear a mask now all the time, or you have to wear a mask if you do have a runny nose or you're feeling feeling unwell. So we need to get to that new normal, to get the confidence of people to fly, to get bums in seats, to get the aircraft companies more viable, which will help the airports. We need to get the confidence of people that it is okay to fly and it's safe.
But I think too, as provincial governments have responsibility for public health in their own province. And there have been certain measures in Newfoundland and Labrador that have been stricter than other provinces. I mean, I know my brother's on a turnaround project in BC, and some of the measures that he takes that happen in BC are not the same as here. But we also know that because of the measures in Newfoundland and Labrador, our cases are so low and our kids are able to go to school and we're able to interact more frequently. And so, one of the issues too, perhaps, is the communications challenges for governments when they're, competing with the social media and the different communications issues coming out from across the country. So, but before we go to a break, so perhaps I'd just like to leave you with that opportunity to address that, Minister, because I think that, from what I'm hearing, yes, we need to find that new normal, but at the same time, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're at a different place than some of the other provinces.
Well, thank you. Thankfully, Lynn, we are at a better place, and I think it's because of the protocols that have been put in place. And I want to again congratulate, the health authorities on what they've been able to do. They've been stellar in keeping COVID, I think, as controlled as possible. And I want to thank municipal leaders for their leadership and the federal government for its leadership on making sure that we're safe. But you are correct in that the protocols are exceptionally important. Following the protocols are exceptionally important, and communicating all of it is paramount. We are moving through this. We are now, we've about 8 months, 9 months into a COVID period. Hopefully there will be a vaccine sooner rather than later. But again, making sure that we continue to follow the protocols. I know that Dr. Fitzgerald is constantly talking to her colleagues across the country, following best practice, following what's happening around the globe. Remember that we were a little later than some, so we're learning from others. So we have the benefit of being just that little tiny bit later than others. So they get the experience, and we follow what we learn from it. And so sometimes you're seeing, something being put in place in Newfoundland and Labrador is because of the context that we have across the country and around the globe of learning how this pandemic is actually spread. What are the protocols that keep each other safe? So listening to those that are the public health authorities that are in contact with others around the world and demonstrating that leadership is going to keep us all safe, and it's going to help us as we move through and come to the new normal.
Thank you. So on that note, let's take a short break. Ms. Hutchings, Minister Coady, and you at home or in your offices or wherever you're joining us today. We'll be right back after a brief message. Welcome back. And so for this last segment of our conversation, let's talk about the COVID supports. Of course, both the provincial, federal governments, in cooperation with the COA, have done a lot of work. Of course, the COA is still doing its regular work, but there's been a lot of work done in COVID supports. So let's take a few minutes and talk about that.
Certainly. Well, the provincial government has put aside $200 million for COVID supports and funding. So things like the Essential Workers Program, where we were able to, with the federal government, give a top-up to essential workers. There are things like the Small Business Support Program that we put in place in budget, in this past budget 2020-2021, where we're offering small businesses the opportunity to, through a small portal on the industry, energy and technology website, they can go in and fill out a quick a very quick form, and they're able to get some funding, a stipend, a small amount of money to help with innovation or with COVID relief. We've been able to do the same with the tourism industry. There's a program that we've put in place through the tourism portal to help tourism operators with a small stipend, again, for COVID supports. We've opened up that program to the arts community and to Music NL so that they have some supports, because we know there are people that are really impacted.
Well, and the arts community is such a core part of
Absolutely.
our economy.
Yeah,
I mean, our tourism industry relies on that talent.
So we were able to increase the grant that we give to Arts NL, and we were also able to open up that program, that COVID support program, and allow them to fill in just a small form online and get some supports. So we also have opened it up again. We have a program for community groups. So, your local Lions Club or your local Legion, who's really a big part of the community, but they've been impacted so significantly by COVID. So again, they can go on the Industry, Energy and Technology website through govnl.ca, and they can fill out a form and receive a small stipend. But again, working with the federal government, working with municipalities, working with the communities to say, what are your needs? How can we help? And of course, we also have put $100 million in the budget towards healthcare. So for testing, for protective gear, for hopefully a vaccine in the very near future. So a lot of investments, that's what I call them, not just money spent, but investments in our communities, investments in diversity. You've seen throughout the budget, of course, a real emphasis on the economy, a real emphasis on communities, and maintaining, of course, the funding that is required for municipalities and municipal grants and infrastructure development. So all that's part of our plan as we move forward through the pandemic.
And for you, Ms. Hutchings, what about what's standing out to you from the federal perspective, but in particular how the federal government is working with the provincial government to ensure that those supports are in place?
Lynn, as Siobhan alluded to, we came out with so many programs at the beginning and throughout the summer and into the fall that we partnered with the province with. As I alluded to at the beginning of the interview, the CERB, the CEBA, the wage subsidy and all those. But there are some other ones that we did. And, when you look at COVID itself, when you look at what was highlighted in COVID, it was underrepresented groups that were really hit hard. Youth, women, Indigenous peoples, newcomers. And we came out with the $25,000 right away for every shelter in every center to help women in need. So that was there. The other one that has always been an issue in rural Canada and in Canada from coast to coast to coast. But of course, COVID really highlighted the issue of connectivity. And there's been a connectivity plan in Canada for the last 10 or 15 years. I'm delighted in the last 5 years, we've connected about 1 million new households with our Connect to Innovate projects, with our CRTC projects, and now with the Universal Broadband Fund that's about to be announced. That is going to highlight, again, how important connectivity is for health, for safety, for kids doing their homework, and most important, for e-commerce and economic recovery. So I'm excited to be chatting about that in the coming weeks of the new Universal Broadband Fund and how we'll partner with the province and all provinces and territories to get more and more Canadians connected. Years ago, John A. Macdonald connected the country with a railway. Now it's not a railway anymore. It's being connected with, low orbit satellites, broadband, even your cell phones. So this new program will help us meet our target of having every Canadian connected by no later than 2030 and 97% connected in the next couple of years. The other thing, of course, is ACOA. We listed off the COVID funding, but ACOA is continuing to doing some great works, as well as other government agencies, but everybody in Newfoundland and Labrador is familiar with ACOA. So through their regular ACOA programming this year, they have put over $52 million into the economy this year. And $32 million of that was into commercial projects. So ACOA is still continuing to do their incredible work on the ground. They've adapted and amended some of their relationships and contracts with existing companies just to help them through these bumpy waters. But don't forget, there are still ongoing programs. And the best thing that our federal government and Siobhan's provincial government has delivered for Newfoundland and Labrador was last April when we announced the Atlantic Accord. Everybody forgets that's $2 billion over 10 years. So that's ongoing funding coming to the province. So we've got to remember that the province is still going. And yes, COVID has attracted another, and not attracted, but because of COVID, we've had these additional funds come in to help people in need. But there is also the ongoing great work that's being done by the province and the federal government and the municipalities working together to make sure that we take advantage of every opportunity for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to succeed and be strong.
And I think it's really interesting that the broadband issue. I remember being in Grey River 20 years ago, and they were setting up, this little telehealth shop. It was really kind of just one room and a screen. And, the opportunities for communities to, this has really opened up that we can do some healthcare by telehealth types of medicine. And that's good news for rural communities and the people who live there.
Without a doubt, Lynn, and I'm glad you raised that. I mean, we've put in place now, for example, through the 811 portal, the 811 on your telephone, and you're able to connect with, a healthcare with healthcare, and you've seen a lot of people moving towards that, and we now have, nurses available for you pretty much around the clock, all the time, available to you to help with your healthcare needs, and that's expanding. Telehealth is something that's very, very important. It's part of that reimagining how services are happening. We've seen tremendous, the MyGovNL portal that is available. We've seen tremendous growth. Like you can't, absolutely unbelievable growth during the COVID period where people were saying, well, I need to connect with MCP. I can do it through my portal. I need to connect with I need to register my car. I can do it through the portal. So you're seeing people, and I'm glad Gudie raised it, and I'm glad to see the supports coming to continue that broadband development, because that's a new way of doing things, a new way of developing things. But we can't forget, of course, that not everybody has broadband. Not everyone knows how to use technology. So, but it is helping to offer services differently for those that can utilize it.
And it's good for the economy too, because the day when an employee has to take 2 hours out of their workday to go to the doctor's office to get a prescription refilled, now they can schedule potentially a phone call with their doctor.
Well,
it's just a different way of doing things, and it's challenged us to really consider, sometimes we found the gaps, but we're finding better ways to do things.
And I think you've just hit the nail on the head. As we move forward, reimagining, and there was a big theme going throughout our budget, reimagining government. How do we offer better services? How do we offer different services? And I think that's going to be incredibly important as we move forward. Even things like the flu vaccine. I don't know if you've all had your flu vaccine.
Oh, yes.
This is a plug. Everybody go get your flu
I've
vaccine.
had mine.
This is important. But you can get it at your doctor's. You can get it at the pharmacy. There are now sites available around the province.
Our kids are getting it at school.
Kids are getting it at school. So we can do things differently. We can offer services differently. And here's how we reimagine government.
Well, it goes back to the saying, just because it's the way it was always done doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. So
good point.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. So Gudie,
I'm going to jump in on the connectivity piece, because I don't know. Of course, I look at Newfoundland and Labrador, but I really look at my riding. And what's interesting is the people from outside of Canada and outside Atlantic Canada that are buying up homes and cottages sight unseen because they want to move to a safer rural area. And again, connectivity will be a big piece of that. So it's amazing. I know I was talking to the mayor of Rose Blanche the other day, and they now have 51 homes that are owned by people from outside the area in Rose Blanche. And it's people that come for the summer from away. Now, they couldn't come this year because of COVID, but amazing the people that are still buying. So again, connectivity is going to be a big piece of that. And speaking with my colleagues from Atlantic Canada, it's amazing to see the people that are coming into the rural areas. So again, connectivity is going to be a big piece in that, in offering all the government services and health and education and safety and everything. So that's the new normal, right?
Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left. So perhaps kind of your final thoughts for our municipal leaders.
Well,
who are watching us
I will
today.
say this to the municipal leaders. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your engagement in your community and making sure that we're all working together. We're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it together, and we're going to be stronger emerging from this. There's a lot of opportunity in Newfoundland and Labrador. It takes your leadership, it takes the provincial government, the federal government, all of us as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians coming together to support and to support each other as we go through COVID, but to support each other in our economy as well. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. I thank you for your service. I thank you for tuning in today. I think this is great that MNL did the conference this way. I'm looking forward to participating and listening to a lot of the discourse during the next number of days. Of course, I always prefer to see people, but I'm glad that we have this opportunity to be together. I know that I've had some great experiences at home in the last number of months over COVID with working from home in the early part of this. I know Gudie loves dogs as well as I do, and having that opportunity to always be together with my family. And I hope you're safe and well. And thanks for tuning in.
And your final thoughts, Gudie?
Siobhan, again, hit the nail on the head. Thank you to all the municipal leaders for what you do, but more importantly, for what you've done in these last 8 months. Nobody, as we've all said, there was no playbook on this, but you've worked together, you've delivered for your communities, and I know you're going to continue to do that. You're going to find those economic opportunities, you're going to find the social opportunities for your towns, and we will get through this together. There is hope on the other side. And be sure you put your name forward again when the municipal elections come up next year. As Siobhan said, yeah, we've all learned to work from home. I would normally be doing this either in person or from Ottawa, but I'm able to do it from here. My dogs love it that I'm home. Only I'm not calling it COVID-19. I'm calling it about COVID-22 now because I think I've got 22 pounds on. I've all been doing a little more eating. But you know what? That just puts light on a very serious thing. But the most important thing is that we support each other. Get out and get away from your screen time. Have a walk. Clear your head. We need to, look after everyone's mental health and all this as well. But the most important thing is to stay well and safe. And the province has done a great job of controlling the virus. And we all need to continue to do our part. Now is not the time to let our guard down. Now is the time to be vigilant in all that we've done because it's worked. We need to keep doing that to make sure we stay safe, therefore our communities and our province stay safe. So thanks for this opportunity. Always wonderful to spend time with you, Siobhan, and look forward to doing this again, hopefully in person. So thanks so much.
And thank you to you, Gudie Hutchings, Siobhan Coady, and to all of you who are joining the Municipality Newfoundland and Labrador's conference online. That's all for us for today.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.